Hey everyone, it's Mark. This is my recap for Pokémon Horizons episode 41, The Intense Mom Appears. This was the 1273rd episode of the Pokemon anime, and it was a Dot-focused episode. I've said before that Dot is my favorite character in Horizons, so you might be a little surprised at what I have to say about this episode. I'm tired of mentioning which version of the intro they use in each episode, so I'm just going to dive straight into the action, which starts aboard the Brave Olivine as Dot and Quaxly are chasing Tinkatink around all over the place. I don't really know what Tinkatink is trying to do, but she starts crying again, so that's not good. Dot gets a text from someone in the middle of all this, but is too busy to respond. We see that Freed is flying back to the airship with the mystery person tagging along, and they must be the person who texted Dot. Yeah, we know that this is Dot's mother, but that hasn't technically been revealed yet in the episode. Anyways, she's not happy about Dot leaving her on red, but back inside we see that Tinkatink was crying right outside of the kitchen, and when Murdoch opens the door, Tinkatink runs inside. A wild goose chase ensues as Murdoch tries to stop Tinkatink from turning his frying pan into a hammer, and notice how Murdoch's phone is left out on the counter? Yeah, well, Dot's mom is spamming him with a bunch of texts too, and she's not happy about neither of them responding, so she's sending Murdoch a bunch of Primeape stickers to show her frustration. Back aboard the Brave Olivine, Liko and Roy have joined the chase for Tinkatink, who is in such a panic that she's running around with a frying pan on her head. This of course leads her right into Terapagos, who just so happens to be walking around on the wing deck, and his collision somehow sends Tinkatink flying high into the sky. Luckily, Freed and the others are just arriving, and a helpful Lycanroc catches Tinkatink out of the air. The frying pan was saved by this woman. Yep, it's our first look at Dot's mother, whose name is Blanca, and these two are shocked to see her. Dot asks her mom why she just showed up without telling them, and Blanca is like, well, you guys were ignoring my texts. I love how Tinkatink instinctively ran to Dot the second that she could, by the way, and again, reiterating something I said last week, but everyone except Wattrel is here. Poor Wattrel. Back to business though, and Blanca scolds Murdoch for his reports about Dot not being long enough, and through this dialogue we find out that Murdoch is Blanca's older brother. She keeps talking and going off on some tangent, so her Lycanroc steps in and tells her to chill out. She gets back on track by saying that Dot's trial period has gone on long enough, and that it's time for her to head back home. Liko and Roy don't like the sound of this, but Blanca is excited to tell her that Dot was only here temporarily. Our introverted hero has disappeared in the middle of all this, and we see her just go lie down face first on her bed, all sad. Yeah, we've all been there before. The others go sit down to talk over some coffee or tea, and Murdoch explains that Blanca is quite the character. She takes exception to this, and it's pretty easy to tell that she's very different from her daughter, but still very socially aloof. They say that Blanca is 10 times the worrier that Murdoch is, which is really saying something, but Liko and Roy point out that Dot does get as excitable as her mother when she's streaming, and Blanca asks what they're talking about. Apparently, Dot used to stream too when she lived at home, and one time Blanca walked in and caused Dot to get all angry and flustered. Liko gets all excited because she remembers watching that stream, and now she's all starstruck that Blanca is Nidothing's mom. Typical Liko. Blanca is confused at what a Nidothing is. Unbelievable. And when she looks it up, she decides to go ask Dot about this. Murdoch suggests bringing her some donuts, and the airship's resident mousehold comes to bring the donuts to her. Apparently, they've been doing all kinds of helpful tasks like this to help pay the Rising Voltacklers back for saving them. Before Blanca can storm off to Dot's room, Liko and Roy step in and ask to talk to Dot for her. Blanca is touched by this. She can't believe her daughter has actually made such close friendships. We get the familiar scene of Liko and Roy talking to Dot's door, but she's just ignoring them both while her Pokemon chow down on those donuts. She finally starts to move a little once Liko and Roy say they should give it up and walk away. Quaxly encourages Dot to go talk to them, but she's not going to chase after them. Instead, she opens the door and sees this visual, her two friends staring and smiling at her. Yeah, their fake out worked. You can tell they really do know Dot well. She sighs and agrees to talk to them, and they all go over to this random part of the airship for some reason. Dot explains that the trial period was her idea, and she starts explaining that she had hit a wall as a streamer when she was living at home. She kept running into things that she couldn't get from inside her room, and we're fully into flashback mode now as we see Dot researching her next video idea, and she comes across a thesis written by this Professor Freed guy. Huh, never heard of him. Dot finds Freed fascinating because he travels all over the world meeting different kinds of Pokemon, and she tells Liko and Roy that the reason the internet is so interesting is because it's filled with people sharing their own experiences. Dot tried to do so much Nidothing research in order to make up for her not having any of her own experiences to share, and that's how she ended up hitting a wall. Just then, she got a notification that Iono was about to start a live stream, so Dot decides to go grab something to eat before it starts. She walks downstairs and finds a random dude sleeping on her couch, and rightfully so, she's kind of freaked out. He introduces himself in cap and mentions that he's a friend of Murdoch's and says that he's excited to finally meet Dot before just asking Dot to fix his phone. Wow, talk about forward. Dot hasn't even introduced herself and yet Freed already knows who she is. Dot is surprised to see the stuff on Freed's phone is the same thing as the thesis she was just reading, and she gets all embarrassed when she realizes that she's talking to the Professor Freed. Dot fixes his phone in no time flat, but this needy professor then asks her to make a Rising Voltaclers app, but Dot is hesitant. Freed gets all philosophical, talking about their interests crossing paths and how this must be fate, and he even asks Dot to join them in the airship. Dot is taken aback by this, and so she declines the offer to make him an app and just walks back to her room. She didn't even get a snack to eat while watching Iono's stream, and that was the whole reason she came out of her room in the first place. I hope you're happy, random professor guy who was sleeping on the couch. You wiped that smug look off your face, mister. Yeah, I agree, Dot. What a weirdo. But let's watch Iono's stream now. The supercharged streamer is taking questions from the audience, and the next one she's going to answer is from someone with the username Homebody. Dot starts having a Liko level freakout when Iono starts to read her comment. Well, Liko probably would have screamed at the top of her lungs, but anyways, Dot's question is if Iono has ever hit a wall as a streamer before. Iono was like, yeah, duh, of course I have, and Dot is surprised to hear this. Iono continues by explaining that you've got to get moving in order to get over a wall, and says the rather conspicuous line about her studio growing wings so it could fly. And oh, would you believe it? Cut to the next morning when Dot sees the brave Olivine taking off and flying away. How convenient. Our hero starts playing back her recent conversations in her head, with Iono talking about flying all over and Freed calling Dot special and asking her to join them aboard the airship. We exit flashback mode as Dot tells her friends that she decided to make the app and join the Rising Voltaclers, although she had to tell her mom it was only on a trial period in order to convince her to let her go. They agree that Dot could stay with the Rising Voltaclers until Blanca came to pick her up, and speak of the devil, look who just showed up. I mean, this is what they get for leaving Dot's room and having this conversation out in the open. Blanca says that the trial period has gone on long enough, but she wants to ask Dot how she feels about that. Problem is that her daughter never tells her anything, and Dot just mumbles that her mom is annoying, which Blanca did not want to hear. She asks her Lycanroc what they should do, and they both take a closer look at the Quaxly chilling in Dot's arms. Blanca asks Dot if she's a Pokemon trainer now, and challenges her to a battle. You know what happens next. Straight to the wing deck we go. It's battle time. The rest of the crew, sans Ludlow, are watching on, and Tink looks a little worried for her trainer. Blanca shouts out that battles speak as loud as words. That's a common saying among trainers. Cut to Molly saying she's never heard that phrase in her life, which I thought was hilarious, but Free thinks there may be some truth to it. Blanca's hypothesis here is that even though Dot won't open up to her, battling will cause Dot to say what she really feels, and there's definitely some sense to that. Still, Dot thinks this is pointless and leave it to Quaxly to step up and get Dot into action. She's surprised that her partner is so raring to go, but Dot knows this isn't the situation that she should run from. She activates her self switch, and we see Blanca tying her headband extra tight, activating her mom switch. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, I guess. The battle gets underway with Dot telling Quaxly to just fire a barrage of water guns, but Blanca doesn't really even have to command her Lycanroc, it's just able to dodge everything pretty easily by itself. This allows Blanca to start talking to Dot directly about how she just stays in her room most of the time. Dot fights back, well, verbally, by saying that she's made new friends and started to appreciate the outside world as well. She explains that she didn't want to be a Pokemon trainer before, but meeting Quaxly changed that, and she thought teaming up with Tink would be fun too, which causes this troublemaker to hold her favorite hammer a little tighter. Amidst all this conversation, Lycanroc has dodged every single one of Quaxly's water guns and closed the distance between them significantly. Lycanroc is looking all menacing and kind of baiting them into an attack, and Dot obliges by calling for Pound. Yeah, not a good idea since Lycanroc knows counter and sends Quaxly flying, so Dot dives to catch her partner. Blanca's theory about this battle getting Dot to speak her mind is really working, because Dot's just thinking out loud without even being asked a question anymore, and this is exactly what her mother wants to hear. Dot calls for another water gun, and Blanca calls for rock throw. These moves cancel each other out, so Dot goes for another pound, which just results in Lycanroc completely annihilating Quaxly with another counter. Our heroes bravely get back up, and Dot tries to think of a solution, honing in on Lycanroc's legs. She tells Quaxly to aim for the horn, aim for the legs, and Quaxly spins past a counter attempt as his legs start to glow. That looks like an awfully low kick, and everyone's favorite duckling follows up with a second low kick. This one looks like a critical hit. Murdoch has to jump into the action this time to catch his little sister's Pokemon, and this thing's knocked out. Now, it may seem a little strange that Lycanroc appeared to get knocked out fairly easily, but technically it did get hit by 2 pound attacks and 2 low kicks, with that last one potentially being a critical hit, so by my calculations, this KO was justified. Anyways, the celebration is on with Tink leading the way, happily embracing his teammate after a well-fought battle. Quaxley is so happy that it doesn't even seem to mind his hair getting all messed up. This whole ordeal has finally built up enough courage in Dot for her to ask Blanca if she can join the Rising Voltaclers permanently, and she pleads for her mom to let her. Dot and Quaxley can't believe Blanca's response to this, which is to burst out in tears and exclaim that this is exactly what she wanted her daughter to say. Everyone gathers around as Blanca hugs Dot in acceptance, and our heroes are glad that their friend is sticking around. And this looked like a minor animation error to me, since Liko and Roy shouldn't be by the staircase and railing anymore. They literally just walked away from there. Anyways, Dot is also starting to get emotional, so she lets her hair down to try and hide her tears. Now that Dot and Blanca have finally opened up to one another, that's as good a time as any for the episode to come to an end. Well, that recap took longer than I thought it would, so let me get straight to the point. Although Dot is my favorite character in Horizons, and this episode did give us plenty of new information about Dot, I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it as much as I thought I would. To try and quantify what I mean, I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10 rating. That's the same rating I gave to episode 9 of Horizons, and I bring that one up because it had a lot of similarities to this episode. Episode 9 was when we met Liko's father, and suddenly they brought up the idea that Liko might leave the Rising Voltaclers and go back to living at home. This particular plotline doesn't really strike a chord with me because, well, like I said, they kind of come out of nowhere. Like, obviously Liko and Dot were never going to leave the crew. There was never any indication that this might happen previously, so why should I buy into it being a possibility now? That takes a lot of the tension out of the episode for me, and thus I was 0% surprised when Liko worked up the courage to ask her father's permission for her to join the Rising Voltaclers permanently, and the same goes for Dot working up the courage to ask the same thing to her mother in this episode. Beyond that plotline, this episode mainly focused on Dot's backstory and why she joined the crew in the first place. I feel like a broken record by bringing up how convenient some of the events are in the Pokemon anime. Like, of course, at the exact moment that Dot feels like she's in a slump, she not only finds some of Freed's research online, but the guy just so happens to be sleeping on their couch downstairs. What are the chances? It just felt so unnatural listening to Freed meet Dot for the first time and try convincing her to join the Rising Voltaclers, so I wasn't as big of a fan of Dot's backstory as I thought I would be. I do feel like there's more to this than what we saw in Dot's flashbacks though, like maybe we're just missing Murdoch's side of the story when he told Freed all about his niece who was really good with technology, and Freed asked to go meet Dot and try to recruit her into joining the crew. Maybe that story is believable, but we have already gotten Murdoch's backstory and it had absolutely nothing to do with his family. It's still possible that we'll hear more of Murdoch's backstory someday though, so I'll remain optimistic about that. The previous episode showed just how well written this series can be, in that Sprigatito's backstory was filling plot holes from like 40 episodes ago, so maybe that set the bar too high when this flashback heavy episode was going to come right after it. On a completely unrelated note, I always talk about how Dot is strangely relatable to me because we're both content creators, and I think it's really interesting that the Pokemon anime would create a character who is a content creator. It's interesting seeing how they write someone with that hobby. For the most part, they get it spot on, but I always notice small details like calling Dot a streamer when Nidothing obviously posts more videos than she does streams, and it's also a little cliche having Dot say things like the net, which sounds like an older person trying to write dialogue that they think a younger person would say. The only other thing I can think of that's worth mentioning in the episode was the battle between Dot and her mother, which was arguably the best battle in Horizons thus far, but it's an incredibly low bar, so it's not even saying much to put this battle into that conversation. Quaxley learning a new move was notable, but in a rare moment, words spoke louder than actions in this battle, as the most important part of this match was Dot finally being able to open up to her mother, and it's a good thing to talk openly about your feelings with other people, whether that be your parents or just anyone in your life. That's a really positive thing to take away from all of this. I also think it was a positive seeing a Midnight form Lycanroc in action. That's my favorite form of Lycanroc, and it was as cool as ever. They seem to pigeonhole this form of Lycanroc into using counter as their main strategy. They even centered Professor Freed's seminar around that very idea, and there's gotta be something to Blanca owning a Lycanroc and Murdoch having Rockruff as his partner. Does this mean that their family is from Alola? Does this mean that Dot will catch a Rockruff one day? From one of my favorite Pokemon to another, let's talk about the preview for the next episode, which is going to take place at the beach. It looks like the rather odd trio of Liko, Roy, and Ludlow are taking center stage in this one, but the real star is going to be Palafin, who I literally just mentioned a couple weeks ago as being one of my favorite Generation 9 Pokemon. That means I am definitely looking forward to the next episode, so make sure you don't miss my review for it by hitting the subscribe button, and go ahead and like this video if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.